everybody. We are going to be talking about the birds today, our cinema snack. Yeah, let's dive into the past and a little bit of Alfred Hitchcock and Tippi Hedren, which, I've always heard the name Tippi Hedren. It's how I remember the story, other than, I remember her name before I remember the story. I don't know about you guys,
Oh, interesting.
but I didn't grow
But
up watching all the old movies.
yeah, for some reason, her name is really attached to this. And I don't know of any other movies that she ever did outside of this and Hitchcock's Marnie. And so maybe that's why she's so tied to Hitchcock, but I don't know.
She
Yeah,
she was an unknown before this. So
okay. Yeah, she just seems she seems iconic to Hitchcock films. And I'm not sure why. She is memorable for sure, but I don't know. She's kind of a mystery to me. Hitchcock's a mystery to me.
So, welcome, Ben and Jeff. And here we are, Amy and Wendy. And let's dive into the movie and the original story a little bit on the birds.
And Hitchcock was one of my favorites growing up. I'd watched, I think, probably everything he's ever made. But it had been probably even early 20s or teens since I'd seen the birds. And I thought, oh, it's going to be quaint or something. And for me, I personally felt like, holy cow, it like held up. I thought it was still terrifying.
I,
My,
you know what, honestly, after going through the pandemic, it's more terrifying because we do not really get an explanation for what triggered the birds, whether it was some new radio signals in the region, particularly since it was kind of located in Bodega Bay, and that's where it started. I mean, they do allude to the one lady's like, "Well, it didn't start till you showed up." It was like, but we know it's not her. I mean, because it's just one lady saying it, and we don't get any implications or insinuations that it's her arrival there that triggered something. But particularly since we know, at the very very beginning, she notices the birds in San Francisco, and they're just massively swirling.
there's much less attempt to explain it than there is in the Du Maurier short story. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's where I get the electrical signals from. Is from the original story, that there was something happening, radio signals or something.
Or the Russians poisoning the birds, or all kinds of
yes,
crazy
or the
conspiracy
weather.
theories. Yeah.
The weather, yeah,
The
was
weather
not.
is the first explanation, yeah, of why the birds are coming
Yes.
in. But yeah. I mean, Hitchcock, said the movie is basically about complacency. So I mean that's sort of what it's thematically about. And I think it's interesting that in the Du Maurier story, there's specifically a reference back to the Blitz, because that was something that Hitchcock obviously and his family experienced. So I think there's I don't think he ever explicitly said that was an inspiration, but I think there's some of that in there if you want to psychoanalyze it.
When people create these horror films, whether it's Godzilla or whatever, it's usually coming out of what we have done, right? Somehow. And so Godzilla was very much a commentary on nuclear war and
Yeah.
Japan getting bombed by
It's kind of a metaphor. It's bubbling up from the collective unconscious. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Hitchcock would say that these movies are nightmares. They have the logic of a dream.
So, what do you think, you guys? If we're looking at the story cone and we were to put it together, I mean, I feel like it's Melanie that's driving the story, pushing it forward. Obviously, she's goes and gets the lovebird, shows up, and if Melanie's driving the story, and I think we're getting it from Melanie's point of view. We get a little segment that is Mitch, but just as an extra viewpoint character, I think Melanie's our central, because we do have some camera on Mitch for a little bit.
She's definitely has to be the PMB, right? I mean,
Yeah, the
she's
primary
definitely a
norm
norm breaker.
breaker too.
Yeah,
Stranger in a
Yeah.
strange land, kind of. I mean,
Well,
you
and
guys come
plus,
down from San Francisco.
yeah, and plus she's a socialite who's been breaking norms for a long time, that she's
Yeah.
even so well, people know who she is. They have negative connotations about her right off the bat. She's judged for that, rightfully or wrongfully. She's judged by that. So she's definitely out there breaking some rules, even if they're not as much as reported. Who knows?
But then we look at the inciting incident, the IED.
I was going to say something about Melanie and the norm breaking. She like makes up stuff as she goes.
She lies, just like, woof.
Yes.
I didn't quite get it at the beginning. I'm like, what is her motivation here?
Well, foreshadowing the conversation on theme, Hitchcock has horrible view on women. His women in most of his films are absolutely frightening. They're just terrible. And I would say the same. The way the mother reacts, and I mean, it's just weird. It's so strange and weird. And so Melanie, all of them are just, they're either very weak or they're just strange.
You could say that about a lot of his men too. Like in general, he presents people as horrible. He pictures us at our worst and our weirdest.
That could be true, but I think he especially takes it to a high level for the women. And I would say in this particular piece, they're off the charts weird.
Very strange mother-son relationships in particular.
Yes, yeah, they're just strange.
So, inciting incident. Where do you think that's happening? What actually? I mean, do we have a late starting story? Do you feel like we had a lot of setup?
You have Marnie driving up to Bodega Bay with the lovebirds, and then you have I think at about 25 minutes you have the Gull dive bomber in the boat. Those two felt like.
So that's kind of what I was wondering. I was wondering if we kind of have a little bit of culpability there with Melanie actually showing up.
It felt like, she was a little bit starting her own story, but then also kind of in a 1-2 punch with the birds come in.
Yeah, at least since we're talking about Melanie's story as primary actor, what changes her trajectory?
Yes, she would have had a different story if she hadn't taken the initiative to go up there.
Yeah,
and she's very headstrong, and that fits her character.
Yeah, it does, and that pits her against. Well, we're going to try to say nature, but nature in a I put down twisted nature because
murderous nature.
Murderous nature. Yeah, we don't get really any explanation. It's left open to us to figure out why the birds are attacking, because if it was really just the feed, then why is there the cycle? The stop and start with long periods in between. That's what makes me think it goes back to the original story when we've got the possible radio signals, or I mean, and I don't see weather coming in the movie either as an explanation, not visually or just insinuated either.
Yeah, we don't know what those cycles are in the movie. In the story, it was tides. When the tide went out, it was like feeding time for the birds or something. And so
that's
they would fly back out to the sea, at least the gulls would. But it is all very weird, though. It's got to be more than that, because the birds are all coordinating together, which the species never did before. So
yeah,
it's definitely messed up.
And I think we've got another system up here too.
The Melanie comes and interrupts this community, or participates in the community.
Yep, absolutely. Bodega Bay. And then we have a larger community that she's struggling up against.
Yeah, because she is in the papers all the time.
Yeah, everyone has certain expectations. What would you guys call that? I mean, there's definitely a bigger system that's like a high society.
Yeah.
Paparazzi. It just reminded me like Paris Hilton, pre-social media, media, I guess.
So I'm kind of wondering if, because like Lydia is getting the information from the newspapers and the radio and stuff from that larger community. Society, so I almost want to have that above, or the community of Bodega Bay is kind of a subset of the larger social dynamics.
Then I would put birds and nature above them.
Yes, trumping them all would be the nature.
I really liked that about the original story, is that we had this very ominous feeling. It was much more of an isolated story. It was just one family. They're cut off from everybody. And they've somehow taken down the BBC even, so they must be everywhere.
the birds.
It's much more ominous in that way.
Do we see allies?
Certainly, I think Kathy, the little girl, is an ally with her.
Oh,
yes.
and right from the beginning.
Yeah,
She's the
like,
only one. Yeah, she's the only one that just is, because she probably isn't part of that, gossipy, newsy world.
Yeah,
and
she's not in that
takes her
social.
at face value right off the bat.
But we do have some strong allies that believe in the system and show up. And then we see movement.
I just wanted to say really, really quickly to muddy the waters even more is that underneath the Bodega Bay community, we do have this little community of the family, and it is a strong community, and there's lots of stuff going in there. So I think there's even that too. But
Like right here.
yeah, well, and again, I would put it, if we're doing size, I would do family and then Bodega Bay and then the wider world beyond that. Yeah. So we've got the school teacher.
Yep, Annie. Who would you say is in charge of who would you put a system for this under this family system?
Lydia.
Right. I'm gonna put her in black here. Lydia. We've got her in charge, and aligned with her is Mitch.
And he's also aligned with that larger critical society that thinks poorly of Melanie.
Yeah, right here, the society. And well, Lydia's too. Oh my goodness, she's very much, she believes in all the stuff. But then we get that opportunity where Melanie is miffed, and she's gonna go off, and he confronts her about naked in the fountain in Rome, and we find out that it was a rival newspaper, and we get a little bit more of a humanistic feel from her, and his opinion gets changed, and I actually see so. I was trying to figure it out. Tell me if you think that this would be a little bit different. I think Mitch is the first person to align himself with Melanie, because there's hints of the romance, and he kind of picked her out in the bird store too, and maybe previous in backstory in the court case. And then, so I have him as the first move, and then I actually have Annie. We felt a little tension at the beginning, but when Melanie comes back, I feel like, there's a little bit more, and Annie is on her side. So I'd say that's number 2. And then, okay, so maybe I'm thinking this wrong.
Does Annie, I have a question. Does Annie, there was a while I wondered if Annie was more safe character for a little while, or does she go straight to
You know
ally?
what?
Because I saw some.
I think you might be right there.
She gives her a little bit of
back and
advice.
forth. Okay,
Yes. I think Annie,
without being on her side, she kind of, it seemed like she tested the relationship first.
yeah, I would say that Annie makes a pit stop here at safe character. And then
And she gives us some helpful information about Lydia.
Yes. And we needed that information. And then I kind of put in, all right, just speaking of tertiary characters that maybe we shouldn't be including in this, I've got the ornithologist lady.
She's aligned with
system.
all of the systems, even nature.
Yeah, she's got all of them, but guess what? She sure gets her comeuppance, and she's like, you were right, and believes Miss Melanie here. So I don't know if I should include that one in or not. But then I see a final last shift.
That's Lydia.
Haha.
I think she goes to safe character also for a little while. Because, or does she, why would
I
she?
think she's
why would
deciding. I don't say we see that overt. We know that she'll accept Melanie until Melanie is this quivering mass in the backseat of the car. And Lydia knows she's got the control, that she will always be needed. Well, we get the feeling that Melanie does need a mother because she didn't have one, especially in her response to Mitch when her comment, assuming that you want to get rid of your mother. And
Yeah.
and she views mothers completely different than Mitch does. And then, and I did see, so a lot of the time we'll call these, and correct me if you've got a different idea, Wendy, is I think when during the tea that, is it coffee or tea that Melanie brings up to Lydia, if we see a moral reasoning shift at that point.
But I think that she's being pushed to her limit, and all of her buttons are being pushed because she is afraid of being left alone. That's her thing that makes her tick, right? Annie gives us that clue, gives Melanie that clue, and now this horrible thing's happening and she's worried she's going to be alone again. And so what I think that is I don't know if she really changes, but I think she grows enough in trust. Melanie's the one that's kind of going on a moral reasoning. She's very self-centered, and she comes here and it faces this very odd, terrifying thing, but she starts showing up in a self-sacrificing way, especially where Kathy's concerned. Kathy's the one person that believed in her.
Going to the school.
Yeah, and so she's trying to help. She really risks and everything. And so, and she's making the tea, and she's just doing whatever she can. So for me, that's kind of, maybe it's like a taming of the shrew moment. I think everyone's being humbled and facing their worst fear. So Lydia's falling apart. Melanie is kind of becoming more ennobled through, it's scary, but she's becoming more ennobled. So I think that her process of maybe moral reasoning shifts is allowing Lydia to be more trusting. That's kind of how I'm seeing it, but I might be wrong too. Because honestly, these characters are so complex and delicious and weird. So I don't know, what do you guys think on that? That's kind of how I see it.
In the end, when Lydia really kind of embraces her in the car, at that point, Melanie is kind of half conscious. She's become a victim. I mean, at that point, she's almost less of a threat. I don't know if there's some of that dynamic in there too, that she's warming up to her because finally in this moment she's just kind of a convalescent. She can't, she's kind of helpless.
Well,
yes.
And that's where I see, okay, so if Melanie was doing a moral reasoning shift and she was being more ennobled and a better character, it's all stripped away. As soon as she makes the stupid female mistake, I'm sorry, but that's what it is, that Hitchcock is saying, and opens that bedroom door. I mean, I get it. We wouldn't have a movie if she didn't. I mean, that's what my husband and I always say. Why did they just do that? Why did they just do that? Because then the movie would be over.
Yeah, but it's so interesting to me that why did she need that scene? I mean, it's an excellent scene, right? It's so good for a horror film, but I am always thinking what's behind, what's in Hitchcock's brain, and I just feel like he's punishing her, she's a vain, horrible woman, and she's trying to be better, but we've got to punish her first before she's totally acceptable. We need to reduce her down to a piddly puddle, and then now we can accept her, because Lydia really does represent the worst of the world's judgment on her, and now she's acceptable because she's been punished and she's been reduced down to nothing. This is how we want our women to be, and controllable. She's now controllable. This is what I think is going on inside of Hitchcock's brain.
Absolutely, I think so, because I mean, this scene was apparently very traumatic for Hedren to film as well. I mean, and I think there's a little bit of Hitchcock was punishing her because she was not requiting his feelings for her, and
so there's a little bit of a story behind that.
He was obsessed with Tippi Hedren. Yeah,
I knew it. I meant to go look that up, and I absolutely knew that was true. And I'd heard horrible stories about Hitchcock anyway, and I think he tortured her all the more and more. He got her back. It's just no, it's horrible. Yeah. Okay.
Oh my gosh, you guys
I think we see that. I just think we see this. I think we see how Hitchcock thinks about women, and we see him absolutely torturing her.
But if you were looking at this from a writer's perspective or a creator's perspective, what could you do that would have made some of those scenes more believable? That's what I start thinking about. How do I keep a really smart character smart and not making those, not creating those moments where the audience is saying, well, why did they just do that? It's totally out of character. It's totally unreasonable. No reasonable person would really do this, would they? I mean, okay, if you're being chased in a horror film, yeah, if you look back because you're trying to figure out if they're chasing you and you trip, okay.
Give her, I know what you're saying. Give her motivation to get in that room. Like she's got to save Kathy or something. You know what I mean? Give her motivation to open that door would have been even better instead of just a horror trope of the woman who's all alone. She's left everyone else downstairs. Yeah, like, she can't do that in the daytime with other people right next to her. It's got to be when you're alone. Those are all just your horror tropes, right?
Yeah. I mean, I sort of forgive it due to the tone in this movie, again, because they are sort of like, nightmare dream logic. Their plausibility sort of falls by the wayside. I mean, like the ornithologist. Why is there suddenly an ornithologist in this?
Yes, a very,
cafe?
Very knowledgeable ornithologist that can reel off numbers just like that.
It's completely implausible. There's it's almost like a dream where it's just you don't know how you got there. It's just suddenly like an Inception. Like the characteristic of a dream is you don't know the interstitial, the logic of how you got there is gone. You're just sort of there in the moment and you don't think about how you got there. It sort of feels to me like the tone of this anyway.
Yeah. And I personally, I really admire stories that take the smart characters and they make smart choices, but still end up, in greater danger, greater danger, greater danger. Because I think that takes a lot of skill.
That's the real challenge, yeah, if you want to do it, yeah.
Yeah, not the cop-out.
Yeah.
And I think movies have come a very long way.
Even with any of the whatever that we think might be dated or not motivated, I think the film is brilliant, and I just think that and it's delicious. Like we love it. It's creepy, and it does everything a horror film should do.
It's still scary. It is still.
I think it's scary
because we aren't given the reason. All right, did you guys notice? It's a modern story.
Yeah.
There's no ending. We don't know if they really got out, and it makes me worry because those birds can go through wooden doors and solid glass panes, and who's to say that little soft top is going to survive an attack? Yeah, hero moment.
Well, it has to be Mitch because he does get them out of the house. He fights off the birds and he gets them on their way to supposed safety.
I was gonna say, in a convertible, in a car a world where the birds are spreading. So does he really save them? Are they saved?
Unclear.
At least for now.
I would have to say it's firmly a modern ending, though. We just really don't. We just don't have the sense of safety at all. In fact, as they just walked through that yard of birds, what a great scene. And she starts going, no.
I thought that was
like,
funny.
oh my gosh, this is so good.
I did like that.
Yeah.
I think we don't really know on an ending. Are they going into more danger or less? I mean, you listen to the radio and but he doesn't tell them about it. I don't know. I really think it's left up to us to debate. We get some resolution between Lydia and Melanie.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't think we know enough to know if they got out. Yeah, let's talk about theme.
I think complacency is a big part of it. Just the kind of frivolity of everyday life, and then chaos can come out of nowhere.
Okay.
The beginning story is very frivolous. Melanie is kind of a frivolous character, and Hitchcock even said if he were to remake the movie, he would make it a kind of a light comedy in the beginning to even more emphasize that element of that everybody is just kind of going about these silly everyday, meaningless activities, and
beware.
and then, chaos swoops in.
that final hit that says, I don't know, an example of somebody that's not complacent, um, surviving it, you know, the prepper that preps for anything. Or,
But at the same time, I mean, there, you know, when chaos does come in, I mean, people kind of band together
yeah,
and survive. I think that's also in there.
together
Sort of
we
again,
can
like the
survive.
Blitz, like, you know, the people who, you know, are otherwise not preparing for disaster manage to summon up
But
inner courage and do what's necessary to weather the storm.
And community, definitely.
yeah, they do survive because they're together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the lovebirds are really symbolic too. That you know that you can become closer lovebirds when you're dealing with trials and chaos around you.
Hmm. Interesting. I know I just did a little bit of reading on the theme, and you know, there's a camp that thinks that it is about women and the toxicity of women, and that the real horror, the real monsters are the women. And I thought that was interesting. And then also there's another camp that says, you know, it's an environmental message, and you know, the way we treat nature, although it's not strongly brought out, but it is there. And that's what I want to end with is I want to show you a trailer for the movie that Hitchcock did. I think this is so delightful. And that he doesn't tell you what it's about, but I think he does kind of lean towards the environmental, our treatment of nature as the underlying message of this film.
How do you do? My name is Alfred Hitchcock, and I would like to tell you about my forthcoming lecture. It is about the birds and their age-long relationship with man. It will be seen in theaters like this across the country. In my lecture, I hope to make you all aware of our good friends, the birds. Theirs is a noble history, and through it all, man has played a conspicuous part. This cave drawing is one of man's earliest sketches of his feathered friend. One can see at once the loving care with which the artist depicted his subject. The story of man and his friends, the birds, is filled with many fine examples of ways in which these noble creatures have added to the beauty of the world. Take this plumed hat from the period of Charles I. How proud the birds must have been to have their feathers plucked out to brighten man's drab life. Here we have a later model, a refinement of the first. Here man, or rather woman, thought enough of the birds to have an entire one as a decoration. It's quite dead, of course. Naturally, the egg plays a very prominent part in my lecture. Not a word about which came first, however. I don't believe in dealing with controversial matters. Thousands of years ago, man was satisfied merely to steal an egg from a nest and use it for food. Now he has perfected this process by imprisoning each hen in a separate cage and by scientifically manipulating the lights so that she doesn't fall into the rut of the old 24-hour day. Thus, he can induce the bird to reach fantastic heights of egg production. Originally, there were many varieties of birds on Earth. Some have become extinct. The great auk, the passenger pigeon, and the famous dodo bird have all disappeared. Actually, they didn't exactly disappear. They were simply killed off, but of course, this is nature's way. Man merely hurries the process along whenever he can be of help. Man and birds have been responsible for a great many advances in our civilization. For example, the bird was the inspiration for the invention of gunpowder, and it was his speed that brought about the development of the shotgun. But man has not been unmindful of his debt to the bird. We have honored our feathered friends in many ways. We cage birds and show them off proudly in most of our zoos. And the turkey is traditionally our guest of honor at Thanksgiving. I suspect you never realized that if it weren't for birds, even some of our pastimes would suffer noticeably. Duck hunting, for example. Granted, bagging a fellow hunter can be diverting, but the supply is rather limited. I hope you don't mind if I have something to eat, but I'm rushed today. Planning the lecture has been most educational for me. I've begun to feel very close to the birds and have developed a real sympathy for our little... What was I saying? Oh yes, I've come to feel very close to the birds and have come to realize how they feel when... I don't think I'll eat just now. Hardly proper with all of you here. Surely the birds appreciate all we've done for them. Don't you? Beautiful cage, fresh water, no other birds to bother you, none of that blinding sunlight. Oh, now why would he do that? Most peculiar. What on earth?
They're coming! They're coming!
Thanks for the good suggestion, Ben, on the movie. I had so much fun reading the original story, which I had never read, and rewatching this film. I had so much fun. And then watching Marnie last night, which is on Netflix streaming right now.
Yeah.
If you just want to see more kooky Hitchcock / Tippi Hedren in action, go watch that. But I'm telling you, it's a little horrifying. It's not meant to be a horror show, but I think it is a little bit of a horror show. So anyway.
Well, thank you, everybody, and have a
Thanks.
great day the rest
Good
of the
analysis.
day. Thinking about the birds and being a little wary.
Don't be complacent out there.